Food is fuel for your body, your mind, and definitely your sport. But let's face it, nutrition is confusing, and the expectations on girls and women to be thin and have a six-pack are exhausting. If you've ever been frustrated with your body, confused about nutrition, obsessed with eating healthy, or guilty when you don't, underate, overate, or overtrained, and overwhelmed with all the pressure, then this podcast is for you. Nutrition can be easy. You can take control of it, but it might start with letting go of control by asking for help and making a change. I'm Lindsay Elizabeth Cortez, sports dietitian and owner of Rise Up Nutrition, where I empower female athletes to overcome nutrition concerns and perform at their highest level, to stop being confused by all the mixed or harmful messages, and finally have confidence in your body as a fierce, fit, and fueled female athlete. Hello, fans and listeners. Wonderful guest joining me today. I'm really excited to chat with her. It's Kate Mihevc Edwards. She is a physical therapist and board-certified orthopedic specialist. Kate graduated from Emory University School of Medicine in 2009 with a Doctor of Physical Therapy degree. She owns her own private physical therapy practice in Atlanta, Georgia, Precision Performance, where she sees clients in person, and she also does some telehealth consultations as well. She prioritizes individualization in care with a holistic and evidence-based approach. Kate is the author of 2 books, Racing Heart and Go Ahead and Stop and Pee. She does many speaking events with her mission, widening the lens on performance and health. Your success depends on more than just your physical body. As an athlete in many different forms and ways throughout her life herself, Dr. Kate has a lot of insight just in athletics, in both treating athletes and being one herself. And I'm really excited for you to hear her story. So Kate, thank you so much for joining the podcast today.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here, Lindsay. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I actually first heard about you through a podcast that you co-host, correct?
Yeah. More Than Miles.
Yeah. More Than Miles. I wanted to give a shout out to that. And that's really where I first heard about you and some of your story and your journey that we'll dig into today. But let's just start with your physical therapy practice. You know, what got you into physical therapy in the first place? Where did your passion begin for that as a career?
Sure. So my practice is Precision Performance and Physical Therapy. I have 3 locations in the Atlanta area. So there's one in Atlanta proper, and then one that's a little bit north, and then one that's about 50 minutes south in a community called Serenbe. And so our clinics, basically, they're private concierge-like practices, and mostly we see runners and triathletes. I would say that specifically in our Atlanta office, we see about 90% runners and triathletes. And then in our other clinics, it might vary a little bit, more strength training, and then some entertainers and corporate folks. So it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of variety between the clinics. But I first started physical therapy as a second career. Yeah. So I had a degree in marketing and communication, and I also had some background in fine arts, photography, sports photography. And I graduated from college, and I was training for a full marathon. And my coach was a physical therapist. And I wasn't really happy with what I was doing. And before I graduated, I knew I didn't really want to be in marketing, but I wanted to finish out what I had started. So I started to follow my coach around quite a bit. And maybe, I hope it wasn't too annoying, but anyway, it was so much that she finally said, why don't you come to work with me? Why don't you figure this out? And then she hooked me up with a couple people. I started shadowing physical therapists, and I said, you know what? I'd like to go back to school. And so I went back to school at night while I worked during the day, and I eventually got into Emory. And from there, I just knew I would always treat runners and triathletes because I was one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are some of the most common issues and injuries that you find yourself treating with these endurance sport athletes?
Well, I mean, if you look at statistics, knees are the most common injured body part for runners in particular, and actually also triathletes. So knees, lots of knees, but In our practice, we treat the whole body. So even if you have a knee issue, often there's some kind of relationship with your hip or your back or your thoracic spine going on. And so they may come in for one body part, but it may be that it's coming from somewhere else. So we address that as well. So they're orthopedics and sports injuries that we treat from the physical perspective. But yeah, there's all sorts of things, lots of back and hip lately.
Yeah, I have learned that from working with physical therapists myself throughout my journey with injuries and stuff like that, that it's like, if I'm having ankle pain, it's actually my back that needs treatment.
Yeah. And that's a common misconception, is that people think that when they have pain in one area, that's where they need to be treated. And early on in my career, I had to learn how to talk with people and explain that, okay, just because your pain is here doesn't mean that's where it's coming from. And it's really important to be able to get that across in a way that people can truly understand and feel good about, so that they don't think you're crazy for treating your back when they come in with something, other kind of pain,
Right. Absolutely. And I do want to just give a shout out to your specialist, that board certification orthopedic specialist, I think is, really what athletes need to look for if they're looking for physical therapy help, because I think that's something that really is important. Would you agree? Obviously, you're the one with the certification, but I just think that's a really important thing. Like, I've had so many people in my lifetime that are just, we're going to whatever is covered by insurance and, or whatever the referral is. But sometimes as an athlete, you have to ask for that. I need the orthopedic specialist, physical therapist.
So I think there's a couple things when it comes to that. Yes, I think that someone who has a board certified specialty certainly has more knowledge about a certain topic or has studied more about that. And I think that that's a great way to go when you're starting to look for people. But I also think that you should look for people who are residency trained. I was one of the first 5,000 PTs in the country to be residency trained. And I think that that can be very beneficial. Now, I think there are plenty of great therapists out there that have neither, that aren't residency trained and aren't board certified. But I do think that having those credentials and going down those paths and doing the extra study really helps you build patterns and really clearly understand what's going on with people a lot easier. Because if you can pattern match when people come in and you can really identify things quickly, you can help them much faster.
It's interesting you said that, because again, while I was listening to one of your episodes of More Than Miles, I think you mentioned something about residency. And I kind of had that thought in the back of my head of like, oh, I didn't necessarily know that physical therapists did residency, or I didn't actually think they did it at all. So so that's something you would choose to do. Not every physical therapist does that.
Right. And they're pretty, residencies are hard to get into now, and there aren't a lot of them. And so even if you want to, you may not be able to do it, but hopefully eventually we're trying to make it easier for everybody that wants to do residency. But it is an extra step, and it can be another year or 2 years, depending on what program you do. And, it's expensive and it's a lot of work, and, you get burnt out pretty quickly. So it just depends if someone's ready for something like that. A lot of people do it right after PT school, like I did, but some people will do it a couple of years later.
Yeah. So, you yourself, Dr. Kate, you got into physical therapy because you yourself was running marathons, triathlons were thrown in the mix as well. So this, the athletics and being an athlete and the sport of endurance sports was so near and dear to you. And if our listeners have kind of already picked up on the title of your podcast being More Than Miles, it's like there's something more to this for you personally. And I think it really, it's your life story, but also shines through in probably how you treat your athletes and everything, which is, that your story with running, you had a near-death experience. And I was wondering if you could share that story with our listeners and how that has transformed your relationship with athletics. And I know this is a big, long story to get into. So start wherever you want to start.
No, that's okay. And I think I've gotten better at shortening it and getting it to the point where it is a long story. And I wrote one of the books you mentioned, I wrote Racing Heart, really goes into depth. And actually I wrote that book really close to when I learned of what was going on. So it was really a way for me to heal. So it's very raw, and but I think it's great for anyone who does lose their sport or loses something to do with their identity. It can be very helpful. But what happened to me is, let's see, I was a runner and triathlete for years. I did, I think, 13 marathons. I ran Boston 3 times. I started doing triathlon. And then I had my son, and I was training for a half-Ironman right after I had my son, about 6 to 8 months later. And during that training, I didn't feel very good. And I kept saying things to myself that I can't believe I did at the time. But I would say things like, what's wrong with you? You're not tough enough. Like, are you still an athlete? You know, since you had your baby, you're not as strong as you were, and things that you would never say to your best friend. But I was talking to myself this way and pushing my body to the limits, and I didn't feel good. I would stop and have to catch my breath all the time. And I felt fatigued. Like I would fall asleep so early, probably around 7 o'clock at night. And I just thought that was normal when you first had a baby.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd never had a baby before, and I heard it was exhausting, which it was. So I attributed the way I was feeling to being postpartum. And I was also breastfeeding, which takes a lot of energy out. But I was trained for this half Ironman, and I went out for a 5-mile run on my son's birthday, his first birthday. And on that run, I again didn't feel well. And I kept talking to myself in a way I would hope nobody speaks to themselves, but I know that as athletes, we do. And every time I stopped, I was short of breath. I wasn't feeling good. I could feel my sports bra kind of tightening up a bit. And I just said, come on, you can do this. Push yourself. And so I sprinted the last half mile of my run as fast as I possibly could. The moment my feet stopped, my heart rate started going up. I looked at my Garmin, and it went from 200 to 250, 260, 300, and 350 beats per minute. And it felt like my bra was strangling me. Like I remember thinking, like, what is wrong with this sports bra? Why is my Garmin broken? Like I was starting to get very confused, and I didn't know what was going on. And so somehow I walked over to my steps because I had stopped directly in front of my house. And I started to realize I was in trouble. And I put my head between my knees and I started to breathe. And I thought, I'm not going inside because I think I'm going to die right now. And if I go inside, my husband will find me on the floor when he gets home from work. If I die out here, someone will find me before he does. And I sat there for a long time, and I don't know how long it was. And when you're feeling that way, it could have just been a minute, you know, but eventually my heart rate started to convert back and everything slowed down and I didn't die. And I was very, very lucky because what I was in was ventricular tachycardia, which is a very dangerous arrhythmia that definitely causes sudden death. So many of the sports figures that you see dying on a basketball court, in a swim or on a run, they have ventricular tachycardia. And so I kind of put it together, but then I was tired all day and I went to work the next day and didn't tell anybody. And when I got to work, I still wasn't feeling right. And I have a friend who I worked with at the time that is very insightful, and also we're very close. And she said, you know, you need to go to the doctor right now. We're canceling all your patients. And we did.
Thank goodness.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I would have done the same thing. I had had other episodes previously running where my heart did that. And I just thought I was out of shape. And I'm in medicine. So imagine somebody who isn't in medicine going through this.
Right.
So I went to the doctor, and for the next 10 months, they tried to figure out what was wrong with me, and they couldn't. So it started with, okay, don't run so fast. You can run a little bit, but don't run so fast. And then they said, you know what? Maybe don't run as much anymore. And then they would say, no more bike riding, no more swimming. Okay, now you can't run at all. And so over several months, I kept losing pieces of myself because as an athlete, our identity is often tied within our sport or tied to our sport. And so, you know, all my friends were runners. All my clients were runners at work. I had just written a course, a 16-week course for Emory called The Endurance Athlete. Everything I wore was running related. I didn't have anything but running shoes and sandals you put on after you run. Like everything in my life revolved around running. And then I slowly couldn't do it anymore. So when they finally diagnosed me, they diagnosed me with something called ARVC, which is arrhythmogenic right ventricular cardiomyopathy. And it's essentially the cells in your heart, they start to break. The little bridges called desmosomes start to break and scar down, causing a change in the electrical pattern of your heart. So now your heart can't, the electrical pattern can't do what it normally does. And that's what causes arrhythmias. And then eventually the scars, they get floppy, and then, you know, the heart doesn't work as well. The muscle in the heart doesn't work as well. So I was told I needed a defibrillator, and I was told I could no longer exercise anymore. And it was devastating. And I went through a long period of sadness and definitely anxiety and depression. Luckily, I knew enough to seek help, and I did. And that changed my life. The week they wanted to put the defibrillator in, I said no, and I flew to Mexico with my best friend.
So a little resistance to the whole process, or?
I think it was one of those things where I felt so out of control. And I think that anybody who loses something they love or goes through a big thing like I did, you just want to find some control somewhere. And that's what I did. I was like, well, I'm not having it done now. I'm not ready. I'm leaving the country. And that's what I did. I came back. I got the defibrillator.
Yeah.
And then, from there, my life has totally changed. I do not run, bike, or swim anymore. And I would if I could. If everything changed right now, I would leave this podcast and run. But I can do yoga, and I can walk, and I do weight training. So I do strength training, lifting weights 3 times a week. So I can do some exercise, but there's nothing that compares to endurance exercise in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, there's so many, gosh, I don't even know what my response is. I mean, I heard this story, so I knew about it. But honestly, hearing you say it again, and like, as we're, looking at each other, that moment where you got to your steps, I just got the complete chills, because I cannot imagine what that felt like, or the thought going through your head of this, I might die right now. I cannot imagine what that feeling and experience was like for you.
I know. And it was my son's first birthday, which was even worse. So, I mean, being on my steps and thinking, okay, well, this is it. I hope he has a good life. I haven't prepared for this.
No. Yeah. So as you mentioned, this is a genetic. Did you mention it's a genetic heart condition? Okay. So, it's something that is and was out of your control, but you did mention like there were earlier warning signs and stuff, but like that athlete mentality of like, just push harder, you're out of shape. Like, how many times did you ignore those warning signs, if you could count? I don't know if you can.
Well, the thing is, there were a lot of warning signs, and that's why I love to talk about this, because I hope that somebody somewhere can hear me that might be going through a similar thing. This is a very rare, I would also like to put out here that this is a very rare condition, so I don't want people to freak out and think that they have to be thinking of this all the time. But for me, I had gone into 2 other episodes of ventricular tachycardia and thought nothing of it. Once was before I was even pregnant. It's the first time I can remember. And I was on a treadmill. And again, I was doing intervals. So I was going down to 6-minute miles. I was pushing my body as fast as I could. And I remember stopping the treadmill, my heart rate going really fast, and thinking, okay, I think something's wrong with me. And I just left the gym and wandered in the parking lot for a while. And I'm pretty sure that was a close one too. And then I never thought of I was scared, but then I thought, wow, I'm out of shape. I got to do that again next time. So it was like one of those things. Instead of saying you should go to the doctor, I said, I just have to train harder. And then I remember a time I was on a 19-mile run and I felt really dizzy and I had to sit down for a while. That wasn't as severe. And then, I passed out in 3 marathons. But I did visit doctors after every single one. And so every marathon I passed out and they kept saying, you're dehydrated. And I knew I wasn't, because I knew better. And I watched my nutrition and I watched my water. And so I went to cardiologist after cardiologist, and I went to physician after physician, and they kept saying that you're just dehydrated and you're fine. And so the symptoms that I would have would be like, I blacked out once right at the finish line of the Philadelphia Marathon. And there's pictures of me crossing the finish line and I don't remember at all.
Wow.
I remember going down and 2 people coming up and holding me under my armpits and then telling me it doesn't count if you don't cross on your feet. So I think they helped me to the finish line and then let go of me. But I don't really know. I woke up in the medical tent. And then there was one in Vermont City Marathon, mile 20, I went down on the side of the road. And then there was another one, I can't remember which one it was, but same thing happened. And so that was all. But then the episode at the gym and the episode of the 19-mile run were after I'd been checked out. So I stopped going to the doctor, because everybody told me I was fine. So I think that what we should mention is that if you ever pass out while during exercise, it's probably a cardiac issue or something that needs to be identified. And I think you are either having Dr. Kim or had Dr. Kim on the show.
Yes, I just recorded with him, and I'm not sure whose episode is going to air first, yours or his. But that's kind of why we had both of you back, recording with both of you, because we're like, well, cardiac issues. Let's talk about it. So yes.
Yeah. So Dr. Kim, he's a sports cardiologist in Atlanta, and he was my cardiologist. And so ever since everything happened, he kind of speaks at a lot of events with me, and we do a lot of things together. But yes, so he was the first one that taught me that, hey, if you're passing out or blacking out during exercise, you are not okay. And it is not dehydration.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as you mentioned, you are by no means trying to scare anybody with your story. Your condition is very, very rare. But I think the message here is take your symptoms seriously, your warning signs.
Yeah.
And you know your body too. Despite going to doctors and they were saying you're okay, just continue to if you feel off with your body because you weren't feeling good, passing out and just not feeling good. You didn't feel right at all.
And I kept asking. The truth is I do say, I ignored it and I pushed it. And that's very true. But at the same time, I had asked for help and I didn't get it. So then I ignored it and pushed it. And I think that happens a lot with athletes is because we're so healthy that people don't really put us in the categories that sometimes we have to be in to get the help we need. And so, my resting heart rate was 36 when I was training all the time. And it was always really low. And so people just thought oh, well, she's just so healthy. There's no way. And I passed all of the cardiac testing several times. So the stress testing, the test isn't designed for athletes like me or anybody that I know, because I would blow past them and nothing would happen. It took another cardiologist, Dr. Al-Kahani, to do a test with me and say, you know what, this is where we would stop the test, but I want you to push it and show me what you can do so that I can see it happen. And that's the first time they ever saw the VTAC, is because he ignored the test and did the test based on me, not what the protocol was. And so you really have to be advocate for yourself, and you really have to find the people that understand athletes, because if you are going to be treated as an athlete, you should be treated by athletes or people who understand it, because we are different animals, mentally, physically, physiologically, everything.
Right. You were not having symptoms or issues except once you got to mile 20 or once you push yourself on that, training run. It was it was in the extreme circumstances. But then again, as an athlete, you were putting yourself in those extreme circumstances over and over and over again. And that's why it was so dangerous.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, fans, I'm going to pause this conversation to let you ladies know about the Rise Up Nutrition Coaching Program. We have a lot of ways that we can help clients here at Rise Up Nutrition, and this is one of 2 amazing opportunities to get the direct help you need. With our team of sports dietitians, this program helps adult female athletes fuel to perform without strict dieting. How good does that sound? Finally, you will understand nutrition for day-to-day training, eat intuitively with foods that you love, and be race day or competition day ready with energy and confidence. We have more details about what's included and how we can help on our website, riseupnutritionrun.com/group coaching. Links are in the show notes. But I quickly want to share what a few of our clients have said about their experiences in this program so far. Sophie, a trail runner, says, quote, I really encourage anyone who has struggled with eating and lives an active lifestyle to consider this program, because it's so hard to know if you're fueling properly without someone on the outside looking in from an objective point of view. I now feel confident in my food choices, and more than anything, confident that I can actually eat more and that it will only benefit my health and my training. Sarah, another one of our clients and triathlete, says, quote, for anyone that is struggling with diet culture, a history of disordered eating, and is trying to learn how to eat and fuel, this is a program they should strongly consider. I've been active my whole life, and trying to fit a mainstream diet has never worked. In fact, it's created more problems than good. working with Rise Up Nutrition has made things very simple. So again, if you are an adult female athlete that wants to perform better without strict dieting, click that link in our show notes to apply to the Rise Up Nutrition Coaching Program, and we would be thrilled to have you join us. Until then, we will get back to the conversation. So this loss that you went through of, running was not only taken away from you like an injury. You deal with injured athletes a lot, and it's very challenging on injured athletes to have their sport be taken away from them for a certain amount of time. But this in many ways was, well, it had to be that we can't do it anymore. Yeah. That's putting your entire life at risk. So it wasn't, it's a different type of injury, right? And I can only imagine that this really helps you treat your patients who are going through orthopedic injuries or musculoskeletal injuries and have to take a few weeks or a couple months off of their sport to really help them through that process, because it's something that you've gone through and I would imagine still go through. Mm-hmm. This might be a silly question, but what are some of your biggest lessons learned or, advice for people that are going through that struggle of a loss of identity when their sport is taken away from them?
Well, this is actually something I speak about a lot. So I do keynote speaks. That's great. So someone's really going to get me to speak now. Oh, that's awesome. Keynote speeches, and I speak to different groups of athletes on a regular basis about losing your athletic identity and what that means. And so athletic identity is basically how much we relate to our sport and our sport relates to us. And people who have really strong athletic identities have a very hard time whenever they get injured. And in my mind, everybody is inevitably going to get injured or have to take a break from their sport at some point. It might not be catastrophic like mine. It might be an ankle injury and you're just taking a short period of time off and then you're better. It might be something a little bit more serious, or it might be catastrophic. So as an athlete, I think it's very important for us to say, okay, what is my athletic identity? And it's something that most of us never even think about until we lose our sport. But also, what can we do outside of our sport that still brings us joy? And so for me, I've had to find a lot of different things that bring me joy outside of my sport. And I always tell my athletes, why don't you build up your toolbox now, so that when you lose your sport, even if it's for a short period of time, it's not as catastrophic and you don't fall into depression and you don't fall into anxiety. And then on the other side, as a healthcare practitioner, it's very important to recognize that athletes go through this. We have to also help give them some control during treatment. So I write my goals with my athletes. I let them participate. I try to give them as much information as structure during their treatment so that they have some control and understanding of what's going on. And I build their treatment plans like a training plan a lot of times so that they really understand where we are now and where we're going. And then on the other side, there's a couple major projects I'm working on around this to help people. So one of the things that's happened since I lost my sport is I've realized that I really only identified with 25% of who I am, my physical body. And I pushed my physical body so much that I really ignored my mental needs, my emotional needs, my spiritual needs, all of these things. And I could have been a much better athlete had I really looked at my health from this whole perspective of all the things. So now what I'm doing is I'm looking at athletes through this wider lens, and the program that I'm building is called Evolved Performance. So I have Precision Performance, which is my physical therapy practice. Yes. And then Evolved Performance is coming soon. And that's something that helps athletes work on their mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical health so that they can reach their greatest potential and then not be injured. So I'm trying to intervene before injury occurs. And then also, I'm creating some other things, but I actually have a call shortly or in a little bit that's going to be about a coloring book I've put together for athletes so that they can work on mindfulness when they're injured or on a regular basis that's, has images that are all running related, that's all sports related. And I've put together some meditation series for runners. So I have a 14-day meditation series for injured athletes and a 7-day race prep meditation series. And then I have a 30-day challenge series. So there's a lot of different components of who we are as athletes that I feel like most of us never address. And if we were to address those, we would do better when we were injured, or we may not get injured because we're addressing everything.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yes. I love the coloring book. I'm excited for that to come out. It's something I'll definitely recommend to my clients. And on your website is where you have access to the meditation series and other courses that you were talking about. I glanced over at those. I think that's just a wonderful thing. It's wonderful for athletes, like you said, to just expand themselves. So they have more than just their athletic identity, or I don't know. Is that how you phrase it? To be more than just your athletic identity, or to just expand your athletic identity?
No, I think you would say is just expand your identity and realize that athlete is just part of who you are. And it can be a big, huge part, but you're more than that. You're more than your body, and you're more than your sport. And once we kind of step outside that and realize it, we can just live a healthier life in general. And it changes how we think about our sport. And so it also changes our physiology, because our mind and our emotions and our beliefs impact our physiology as well. And so all those things are linked.
They really are. So I love that, it's twofold. It's like when sport is taken away from you, let's expand your identity, but also let's do that preventatively, because then when you are still training, competing, you're probably going to reach a higher level of physical performance when you are embodying every piece of you. Like you said, you were only tapping into 25% of who you were.
I really was. And I think the hard thing is, as athletes, we're taught that the things we need to address to be healthy are food, exercise, strength. We might maybe think about sleep, which is definitely something we should, and then hydration. But those are the only things we really focus on. And so when someone feels like they're healthy, they feel like they're doing all those things. And that's, again, only 25% of what we need to be doing. And so to reach our fullest potential, which means we're not injured all the time, because injury occurs when there's a breakdown. And a lot of times it has to do with stress, and stress is, physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual. Anyway, our body breaks down when it reaches a certain threshold. And if we can build up that threshold by working on other parts of who we are as people, because we're people before athletes, then we're stronger, and we're going to perform better, and we're going to feel better.
Mm-hmm. I'm on board 100%.
I'm glad.
Yeah. Well, and it's definitely, it's something that I work through with my clients a lot. And, I've had my own personal experiences just with the more, just the injuries that athletes see. Like if I think back to my athleticism personally, I've had I've had 3 pretty major surgeries that took me out for a significant amount of time. And then one life event that affected my mental health, where I couldn't run. How people, it's like with nutrition, where it's like when you're stressed, some people stress eat, some people can't eat at all when they're stressed. And then same thing with me with mental health. Like some people train harder when they're depressed or anxious, and some people can't train at all.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm the side of when things are wrong with me mentally, I cannot train. My body shuts down.
Oh, wow. That's the opposite of me.
Yeah. My body, I always say I'm a happy runner. If I'm happy, I have a great run. If I'm not happy, running doesn't help me. My body shuts down physically. So anyways, I went through a period of time where it was like I couldn't run because of what was going on emotionally. And so I've had those waves. And so here I am, years later, and it's like I still identify as a runner, but I've had to go through that of I had my time period where I leaned into yoga and meditation big time. And no, I'm not doing yoga every day, but I'm like, I know I could tap back into that, and my period of time currently where I'm just leaning into my career like crazy, and you can just really expand yourself. And so it is tapping into all these other areas of your identity where you can really shine too. I think that's probably something we both want to express is when you do lean into these other areas, you become a better version of yourself even.
You do. And we have to remember that health is a continuum, right? So sometimes you're going to be doing more physical, or sometimes you're going to be doing more running or yoga or meditation. But it doesn't mean that there's no such thing as balance. And so we just have to kind of figure out where we are in that continuum. And we have to recognize that there are these 4 areas. We have to do something about those 4 areas. We can't ignore them because we can't see them and we don't like them and they're not as fun, but we have to be aware of them. But yeah, maybe sometimes you're spending more time in the physical or more in, mental, but as long as you're addressing them all, it's okay. It's a continuum. No one's perfect.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I'd love to, I hope this isn't too blunt of a changing topics now, but
that's okay. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Because these are things you speak about and you're keynote speaker. You have books that you've written on. I kind of want to get into, because I will, unfortunately, I have not yet read your books, but I'm really interested in the go ahead, stop and pee. So I think I'm going to get that one next. But I'd love to hear you just speak and tell your listeners, a bit about your books, because that title's got me. I've got to get it because of the title.
Well, thank you. That came to me in a meditation, which is funny, which is where a lot of my good stuff comes from. But so that book it was co-written with my friend, Dr. Blair Green, who's a pelvic health therapist. And so I have always been like a running specialist, endurance athlete specialist, and she's a pelvic floor therapist. And both of us had been pregnant and ran through pregnancy, and then realized that during pregnancy and then postpartum, there were no resources for athletes or women, none, zero. And that's not necessarily the case now. There's really, in the last few years, actually since our book came out right before the pandemic, the resources are starting to pop up, which is really great. But at the time, there were no resources whatsoever. So we said, you know what, if we're in the medical field and we don't know what to do during pregnancy and postpartum, this is a problem. What do other people do? And so we wrote this book from a position of physical therapists that have been through it. So we share our personal stories about running during pregnancy and postpartum, which are kind of funny. Like I threw up the whole pregnancy basically. And the only way I didn't throw up was running. I would run 10 miles so that I wouldn't throw up that day. And then, when I got pregnant, I love my son. And I'm so glad I had a child, but I wasn't really happy about it. So I threw all the pregnancy tests at my husband. And he was trying to get away. And then he's like, can I be happy? And I was like, no. So we tell our stories around that so that you can relate to us. But then everything in the book is researched. And so all of our references are in the back as well. So everything is based on research. And it starts with, there's 2 sections, pregnancy and postpartum. In the first part, we start with myths. So we bust a bunch of myths about pregnancy or postpartum. And then we go into what happens in the physiology of the body. And then we actually tell you what to do. So we give you exercises. I wrote return to run programs. We have all of that in the book so that it's a place, it's supposed to act as a resource. So you can kind of flip through it and go to the area that you need to go to learn what you need to learn.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Literally buying it right when we hop off this call. I'm 3.5 months postpartum after my first son. So this is needed.
Yeah. So it's
necessary.
It's a great time. And it's cool because some of the women in Britain who are doing a lot of the work are friends of ours. And, when the Return to Run guidelines came out in the British Journal of Medicine, it was the same time our book came out, and they were basically the same thing. We came to the same conclusion at the same time.
Wow.
That was really cool. So it's all in there, and hopefully it'll answer questions. And I think the oneness, see, again, what kind of speaker am I? So I think one of the most important things in it is that it's written for the regular person, but also the medical practitioner. So anybody can understand what it says. And it's very, very clear. And it also says hey, you've got to give yourself grace. You just had a baby. Modern society pushes us to this point where we think we have to, quote, get our body back after we have a baby. But that's just not true. And our body's completely different, and it may never be the same. It might actually be better if we just let it be a little bit so it can heal. And we also address, stress is stress, and postpartum is one of the most stressful times of your life.
Actually, that was something that you wrote somewhere, I don't know, your blog, your website, something I was reading, your Instagram, that really helped me personally right now. You know, they say after having a baby, your body may never be the same. And you hear that and you just kind of like sink for a moment. And then whatever you wrote and what you just said is like, but it might actually be better.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, what if I am stronger, more resilient, you know, a better athlete after this? Like, that's a possibility. Just because my body's different doesn't mean it's worse.
100%.
Yeah. So thank you for that. That really, like, I'm getting emotional thinking about it because I just read that this week as I was like preparing to talk to you. And I was like, wow, I never thought of that.
Well, you're welcome. And I think it's so true. I see some of the strongest athletes after they've had babies. And I think we're mentally stronger after we've gone through that process. So maybe chalk it up to our mental strength. I don't know, but a lot of women are, we're never the same, but we're often much better.
Mm-hmm. I love that perspective. Yeah. And how about your book, Racing Heart? Now, you said you wrote that before your personal diagnosis.
Well, it was right after my personal diagnosis. Yeah. Okay. So I had already been diagnosed, but it was, like I said, it definitely goes through what happened. So it talks a lot about athletic identity and what it's like. And I even wrote the part about when I found out my son had the gene and what that felt like as a mom and, you know, all of that. And then I also started to write about like what I was doing to get out of the hole and to start to feel better. And, you know, that there is light at the other side. So sometimes we go through these really dark things, but sometimes it's much, you know, you learn a lot about yourself or your surroundings or other people and you come out so much stronger. And so that book is just the journey of what it was like to go through that and come out the other side.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Do you think there's another book of what the other side is like on the way?
I have like 500 books in my head right now. And so my coloring book is next, which that'll be out in like 6 weeks, I think. I'll put it all over my Instagram and everything. That's going to be really fun. And I've got that's only part of this really cool thing I'm working on that I'm not going to say yet.
Okay.
But then there's definitely 1 or 2 more books coming out. I just don't have them on paper yet.
Yeah. 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 Because it just sounds like, Kate, like you're really flourishing on the other side of it all. You know, you have found so much more to who you are and now how you can help people as well.
It gave me it was a paradigm change for me. It was a shift in perspective that I needed that I hope that I can offer other people who get stuck.
For sure. Sorry, I just want to ask a little question when you mentioned that your son has the gene. So you found that out through genetic testing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, I don't know. I wanted to touch on that because when you have something that's genetic, it's like, okay, well, now we can get that testing to see preventatively, you know, the situation instead of having some scares, you know, later on down the road.
Right. So with the gene doesn't always turn on, right? So just because you have a gene doesn't mean you're going to get the disease. And what turns this gene on is extreme exercise. And so the more you exercise, the more likely you are to get the disease. And I was an extreme exerciser in every single way possible. And so I don't know which one of my parents had it or has the gene because they didn't get tested. But my father was an extreme athlete. My mom wasn't, but she was a little bit of an athlete. So when I found out it was genetic, I know the name of the gene. There's several genes that actually can turn into this, but I knew what I had. And I had my son tested. And so he had the gene, which was the worst day of my life, actually, worse than when I found out I had it. But now I know that he can't really do extreme sports or really sports at all. So we have been struggling with the idea of, well, what do we do? So since he's 7 now, and he's very active. He's like me. So I'm the kind of person, if I don't move, like my brain goes like this, you know, back and forth like a crazy person. So he's like that. And we've put him in piano and he does Spanish tutoring and art and science. And then we let him do karate because that was okay. And now they said he could do baseball, but we can't just do all the run drills. So we're going to do that. But he would have liked to play soccer. He would have liked to do the other things. He loves to run. He wants to be in running races, but he can't be. And we've just educated him about that since the beginning. Some people let their kids do that if they have this gene until a certain age and then they pull them out. But our feeling was I didn't want him to fall in love with something and then have it taken away like I had.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's so challenging. And instead trying to find love in the things that you can do, which is, what you've done. You said you're active, you've found movement, you do yoga, weightlifting, there are things that you can do. So let's fall in love with the things that are healthy for us.
Yeah, exactly. And I have one of those electric bikes now, which I was mad when my husband got me electric bike, or before he did, because I said, who goes on a bike if you're not burning calories? And that's definitely an athletic perspective. I was so mad about it, but it really has given me freedom because now I can go on bike rides with my family and not put myself in danger. So after I was over the anger part, which, still I have a bit of a, I'm very passionate. Once that was over, I was happy.
Yeah. Yeah. No, those electric bikes are interesting. My sister and her husband just got them because he bikes to work. And it was like, although it started as this, let's bike to work. It's like, actually, I don't want to show up to work super sweaty. So
well, that's right. And I mean, maybe I didn't mind in my 20s, but now in my 40s, I probably should look a little bit more together. That's kind of like how
Yeah.
That's right. But no, a lot of people have them now, and they're great. They're really great. In fact, my husband says, I kind of want one. And I'm like, lazy. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I think that's why my sister ended up getting one, because she got jealous that her husband was using the electric bike. And she's like, wait, I'm over here on the regular bike. Like, I need to keep up with you. So
that's right. Funny.
Now they both have them. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, Kate, this has just been awesome to have you on to share your story, share some of your wisdom, and of course, give our listeners so many resources that they can tap into. So we will link all this in the show notes, but just to say it out loud, like, where can people follow you on social media or find out more on your website?
Sure. So I have to spell it probably. This was not a good decision when I started making my website, but there's two places. So precisionpt.org is where you can go for my physical therapy practice. And I don't see as many clients anymore because I'm doing a lot of other things, but I have therapists that I've trained and mentored for years that are absolutely fantastic. But then KateMihevc Edwards.com. So it's Kate, MIHEVC Edwards.com is my website where I'm housing, all the other stuff. Evolved Performance will be there soon. It's not on there yet. So if you look at it, you won't see it yet, but, the meditation is there and there's a lot of resources. And then Kate Mihevc Edwards is my Instagram. And that's where I usually post things about what's coming up. And that's where my book or my coloring book will show up first.
Yeah. Awesome. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, Kate, we end every podcast episode with some fun questions. We didn't really chat nutrition too much, but that's okay. No. Because like you said, that's only one piece of what being a healthy athlete looks like. So it was really important.
It's important though.
It is. But it was important to highlight all the other things in our conversation today. But with that being said, here's a food question for you.
Sure.
Ready?
Yep.
If there was one food that you could eat every single day for the rest of your life and never get sick of it.
I love Indian food. I mean, it's true love.
Yeah.
But it's hard to tell if it's that or chocolate, but I'm pretty sure, I don't know. It depends on the day.
Yeah. Indian food is really flavored, like all the spices that they use. It's just really exciting,
Yeah, it is. And of course the bread and the rice, which I don't eat a lot of unless I'm eating Indian food. So it's like all the flavors and the spices. And when I was little, one of my best friends was from India. So I started eating it when I was very young.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. And of course, a shout out to chocolate. We love chocolate too.
Yeah.
So
I know, actually, I have this thing that my office manager gave me, and this is a lock box, and it's for emergencies, and there's chocolate in there. So it's, she hides it all over the office.
That's great. Well, Kate, I know that your first love was running. So answer this question however you would like to. What is your favorite sport to participate in?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, obviously it would be running. So if I could do it, it would definitely be that. Now, I mean, I really do love yoga, but I like going to classes. I don't like to do it on my own. I think anything that has, other people involved, like I like the camaraderie of things. And even though yoga is like your own thing, once you get to a studio that you love, like I have a studio in Atlanta that I love called Form Yoga. And, like I love all the people there and I love the teachers, and you still get some of that camaraderie. I think that that's probably it. Of course, then I also love weight training with Amber. So I don't know. I'm sorry. I just love to move.
Yeah. No, but that camaraderie piece, like you mentioned, especially with those runners who are listening to this, like that is one of the reasons we love running. We love our running group and the races, but it's like you can find that in other sports. Like go to the yoga studio, find your yoga class, find your favorite instructor, find your group of people. And, I think that's why like CrossFit is so huge, because it's a community.
Yes, I agree.
That's why Peloton boomed, because it's a community.
Yep.
So you got to get tied into your community, and you're going to find your people there that make this sport and training, so much fun.
Well, and I think that's it. I think you have to be open to it. I wasn't open to it when I first lost running. I was just mad all the time. And so I didn't want to find anybody else to be friends with. But then when I opened up and I was able to be more free emotionally, yoga was definitely where I found it.
Yeah, I love that. So how about as a spectator? Do you have a favorite sport to spectate and watch?
I love baseball. Yeah, I'm from, New York originally, upstate New York. And my grandma's a huge Yankees fan. I mean, huge. Like she's 97. She'll be 98 this year. And she still prints out the schedule and she writes W or L next to the game. And she has a whole binder for the Yankees, and with everything for every year. And so it makes it hard not to love it when you have someone like that in your family.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. And as we like to highlight female athletes on this podcast, is there a female athlete that you find just a role model or an inspiration that you want to give a shout out to, whether it's somebody, well known or it's just someone in your personal life?
That is a really, really great question. And I love that you ask that. I think that there are a lot of really great female athletes out there. And there are a lot of women that had to do so much for us to get where we are. So it's a hard question because I have several on my mind. The person that comes to mind right now, though, is because of something that happened recently. So I think Kara Goucher is going through something really hard right now. And she's losing running. And she was one of the first people I knew in terms of professional female athletes that I could say, oh my gosh, I look like that, or I want to run like that. And so I'd say it would be Kara Goucher, but for twofold, because she really spoke out about pregnancy. She really was out there in front as a female athlete, and she spoke out about things that happened with Alberto Salazar. And now she's really telling her story of losing her athletic identity. And so I really love kind of everything that she's done for us as humans and women and athletes, and just being open and honest and vulnerable.
Wow. That's just the perfect person to highlight and for your conversation, because she has done so much for this sport and for female athletes, but she's done so much more just as humans and supporting women. And so again, as kind of a theme of this conversation and episode today of finding more of yourself than just that sport. So
exactly. Yeah.
Dr. Kate, thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'm very happy to be here. So thanks for inviting me.
I really hope you enjoyed that episode, and thanks for listening. But before I let you go, I have free resources that you can have access to right away, right now, so that you can start fueling your body as a fierce, fit, and fueled female athlete. First, I have your Red S recovery race. If you've ever wondered if you might be struggling with Red S, curious to learn more, or know you have Red S and are looking to recover fast, then you can head to www.riseupnutritionrun.com/RedS and download the Red S Recovery Race. See how you place and figure out the next steps to recovery. Plus, while there, I have a few other great resources for you, including 3 nutrition secrets that every elite athlete swears by, and access to our private Facebook community, Female Athlete Nutrition. So again, to gain access to all of this, head to riseupnutritionrun.com/RedS. That's /REDS, and you can gain access and get the help you need fast. Too many girls and women and female athletes struggle with nutrition, but you don't have to any longer. Become fierce, fit, and fueled. Links in the show notes, and I'll see you next time.